Shalom Beth El. In our Torah portion this week, Parashat Pinchas, we open with an extremely disturbing image of Pinchas of the priestly family continuing to wage his zealous war against intermixing with Midianite women. This carries over from the end of last week's Torah portion, Balak, where we begin to read of this story. At the end of this violent uprising, we read this line, just 3 words actually, at the beginning of chapter 26, which really stands out to me this year, which is Vayehi acharei hamagefa, and it came to pass after the plague. Now, the word magefa in Hebrew can refer to a whole host of plagues, whether they're pestilence or physical illness, or in this case, violence. And here it signals a demarcation between this horrible scene and what is to follow, which is God commanding Elazar, the priest, to lift up the heads, to count the heads of the tribes in a much more peaceful ordeal. Of course, later in our portion, we have an even more exciting image of inclusivity, which is the whole famous story of the 5 daughters of Tzlafchad, 5 women whose father had died without a male heir. And they're asking Moshe, in the absence of a male heir to inherit the father's land, may they inherit the father's land. And this, of course, this story is so important that Moses has to approach God and ask for a decision, a legal determination. And of course, God sides with the women, and the daughters are able to inherit along with their father. You might ask, how do we make sense of the trajectory from this incredibly violent scene with which we open to the counting of the heads of the tribes, and finally to the victory of the daughters of Tzlafchad, and the victory truly for all of us in the battle for equality? How do we make sense of this narrative that inherently unfolds? And I'd like to propose a few answers to this question. One is that those 3 words I mentioned before, and it came to pass after the plague, this really speaks to our moment. We might currently find ourselves in a plague moment, but that reminder that this portion has, that there's an after, is actually a very profound, a theologically profound reminder, and a well-timed reminder. And how do we move ourselves to that point of after, and how do we, in our own hearts, separate between those episodes? There's always a before and an after to a plague. And that plague can be exclusion. And so it was in the portion of this Torah reading. Although the Torah lionizes Pinchas for sure, as moderns, we look at this very much askance and with tremendous difficulty. And so the trajectory that builds to the story of Tzlafchad is one that reminds us that we can always expand our horizons, and we can always argue and push back with the status quo, and that if we do it in a respectful and thoughtful way, we can win. And indeed, there's an important hidden lesson here when just after the conversation of the daughters of Tzlafchad, Moses is summoned by God and told that he is to ascend Har Nevo, the mountain of Nevo, for his death. Now the rabbis puzzle and say, why? Why this juxtaposition? What do we make a sense of this? But the profound idea is that the judgment concerning Tzlafchad is really the final one before Moshe is summoned for his death, teaches us an important lesson that Moses' life work has been completed, that Moses has succeeded. The idea that even a most traditionally disenfranchised group such as women feel an ownership with Torah, with Israel, with the division of the land. They feel it's their right, it's their prerogative. And with Torah, they feel they can be part of the legal conversation, and that unfolding chain of conversation speaks so much to the progress that Moshe has helped create in his own lifetime. And so we end this portion on a high note. And so too, may we all continue and culminate our efforts on this high note of inclusion, of celebration, and of belonging. We can also think about ways in which we can help bring about the end of the plague. Right now in our own lives, what can we do to make this world a more inclusive space? What can we do to make this world a healthier space? A plague is a moment when we're asked to reevaluate what are our priorities. So while the plague is never pleasant, it's always an opportunity for us and for all of us to be our best selves. So I wish all of you a meaningful after the plague, and may we all have an active hand in seeing this plague cease, all the plagues that beset our society right now. Shabbat Shalom. Be healthy, be safe, and take good care.